Evening and all, welcome back to Vanguard. So this video is a direct kind of response to this, which is I just listened to the podcast and I thought I'd do a little video because firstly you should go and listen to the podcast. If you have any interest in Vanguard or Dust, it's worth a read because, or worth a listen rather, because it does, it's interesting. I was interested. For 51 minutes I remained passive, didn't move, in a complete state of complete stasis. And I listened to a very interesting conversation about kind of a number of topics, which we'll break down now into something that really kind of challenges and talks about it. So the first thing that was really spoken about was that there's a bit of kind of pressure on the developers, I guess, to create more than one gun. And I think this is quite interesting because, I mean, obviously, yes, you want more than one gun. If I think back to the kind of interesting first-person shooters I've played where weaponry is a real thing, I mean, this is a challenge, I guess, because if you look at things like modern shooters like COD, you get the kind of crazy people who really just love that M4 so much that they've gone and bought an Airfix Model 1 that hangs on their wall, and they look at it and they touch themselves. And I suspect that's probably what we're having a little bit of an issue here with, is there's a lot of people that really love guns. Like, you know how you like girls or cars or something, they like guns a little bit more than that, and that's why it's a little bit uncomfortable. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. If you're into it, okay, fine. But when I think of guns in first-person shooters, I don't then associate them to real-world firearms. I mean, that's weird, isn't it? But I don't do that. But I think in this game, obviously people want different experience, because I would agree, the kind of assault rifle meme, meta, whatever, is good. The gun game was excellent in this, as I've said many times. I just suspect that there's going to be some pressure to have things like, support weapons, shotguns, sniper rifles, all that good stuff. And I'd probably say avoid that, because this is the future. We are in space future right now. There must be a better way to do this. And I always think of the much acclaimed film, The Fifth Element, with Bruce Willis, which to me always kind of came into my mind when I thought of what they were trying to do in this. Do you remember the Zorg Industries weapon that he used? Remember Gary Oldman? It was like a modular gun that you would basically tell it to be a rocket launcher, a sniper rifle, an assault rifle, a flamethrower. I mean, it did everything. I always think of that when they talk about adaptive weapons. And to be honest, that's sci-fi. When they created that whole concept, it was because they were trying to create a sci-fi weapon. And in the future, in space, you would imagine that things like assault rifles are probably not used as much anymore. But then again, they are, I guess, because if you look at the weaponry of Eve, the ships, what they have turrets and howitzers and railguns and things like that. So it's difficult. My personal preference of this is I like their mantra, which is let's put something in and let's see how people break it. Let's see how people use it. A comment was made that you could basically put 15 rests on it. So basically, handles or whatever. So you've got the most stable gun in the world ever. Cool. That's interesting. I kind of like that. I think that is of interest to me. But I do agree. It's a challenge when you say, well, there's only one gun, because a lot of people just go, oh, as in, oh, that's a shame. And I think, how do you get past that? Well, you make it so that you say, well, maybe there's many platforms, a pistol platform, a shotgun platform, but they could be entirely different things. And again, thinking back to sort of games that I've played where you have really good weaponry, it tends to be where there's something unique about it. And this is an Eve game, so fittings are important, because you don't have suit fitting in this, which again, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But if guns are the way that you bespoke your character, then you need more than one gun, and obviously they're going to respond to that and change that. So that was interesting. A comment was made also about MMO FPS. This is, I think, quite a key challenge for this game, because there's 1,000,001 games like this out there. There's 1,000,001 games like this being developed out there, but none of them are Eve, and none of them have the background, the story of Eve. So for me, and again, I don't think I would really be that bothered about another FPS. After Dust, I went hard on Dust, because to me, Dust was that ultimate casual game. Come home from work, you get in, sit down, you pour a scotch and coke, You basically sit there and you quickly get the girlfriend out the way. You kind of throw money at her and she scuttles off to the shops to buy whatever she wants. And you could basically sit there and play play a few rounds of Dust with your boys. I think that's kind of the issue here, is that if it's an MMO FPS, way more stuff to do, way more interesting, way less competition, because, again, if they just go and try and make another PlanetSide, they're not going to do terribly well, I think. I think this game is better than that. It deserves a place where I think the MMO aspect is everything. And I liked that. I mean, I did enjoy the whole process of deploying, getting resources, and then deploying back. I think it was very... I don't know, I liked it a lot. I thought that really sang to me. And what CCP excels at is differentiation. There is no game out there like Eve. None. Seriously, I've looked for a long time. There is nothing that even comes close to Eve. And you want people to say that about your shooter. And I got the impression that that's what they do. Because there was a lot of really kind of useful comments around things like, how can they tie this to Eve better? You've got all of that story of Eve, all of the factions, everything. And the thing, again, that people think about when you think of Eve is not necessarily anything that anyone who knows Eve talks about. It's things like the $1 million battles. $1 million of real world, or rather, virtual game asset was destroyed in this battle, and isn't that interesting? Makes all the headlines, makes people go, oh my days, what is this? And I think that's what they have to do here as well, is you have to have some sort of ludicrously expensive end game thing like Titans and so on in this game, Vanguard. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how it will work. I don't know. I'm not developing this. But if you had that, then effectively you start to plug into something a bit different. Because again, if you think of all the things like PlanetSide and that, what does this game have that's different to that? Well, it has wealth. And wealth is a huge driver when it comes to games. I am amazed how many people, like if there's a resource you can collect in any game, there are people who will go and spend days resource collecting it. And I find that quite interesting because I don't get it. I don't get why people do that. But it's because they enjoy that. And I think this is going to be potentially the differentiator here, because there are going to be people that will, deploy continually because it gives them the ability to earn credits, earn money, but also earn resources. That in itself could be a huge differentiator between this and many, many other games of a similar ilk. So I'm quite excited about that. I thought that was it's a really interesting podcast. I do recommend you go listen to it, because it starts to really get to the sort of bones of what are they trying to build. They're in an early stage of this game still, and they have some really good foundations here, because the gun game is excellent. It is really, really good. And I think, the graphics are great. I liked an awful lot about this test. When it was out, I was very much playing it. And I think now it comes down to, where are they going with it, and what's going to be the way to make it, I guess in my mind, a success, because it's a challenging road ahead of them. I can only just imagine, because the problem with FPS is they are infinitely forgettable, because there are so many of them. And I think even like if you think of FPSs as like a big hole, like a big circle, to cut a tiny sliver off the top of it, that's FPS shooters. And then if you cut, again, that into a third, that's successful FPS shooters. So you see what I mean? It's like, there's a lot of challenge here. There's a lot of problems, because people firstly don't necessarily relate to the real world element of shooting gun games, because it's more fun to shoot a gun that exists in the real world on Earth doing things in a modern time. And then when you start to put that in space, I think it loses some of its weight. So, challenge, I can see that being a bit of a problem. I think, again, the challenge they have is that how do you get people to listen to you when you're basically EVE Online creating an FPS? There's not pedigree there. So it's a bit challenging. How do you get people to take notice of you? Well, for me, and again, this comes all the way back to kind of the business school 101, is you differentiate. And that's what, I guess, this whole video is about. Are they trying to compete with the current, let's say, established shooters, or is there an element here of trying to differentiate? And I can't call that at the moment. I don't quite see where their design impetus is, because it does feel like, oh, we saw this and I like that, so we copied it, and I saw this and that was cool, so we copied it. But then I sort of think to myself, well, what's different? What are you going to do to differentiate this? And I think all of the things that there are potentially there to differentiate. So, incredible story, number one, wealth, number two. I think the kind of, if they put into the game excessive kind of, ISK and resource capture, etc., that's interesting. If you put into it that kind of, think about it, valuable moons in Eve cause fights, so therefore that's content. This is all good stuff. This could be really quite interesting. I honestly think the thing that I didn't hear, and it did worry me a bit, was there's not really still much of an attempt to tie the mechanics of the game to Eve. The story, yes, but not the mechanics. Because that surely alone is something worth looking at. And I'm not saying it has to be like Star Citizen or Elite Dangerous, where you fly your ship, you land it, you get out, and now all of a sudden you've got a gun. I don't think they need to do that. But I do like the concept of using a first-person perspective of some of these incredible sci-fi spaces, like the ships. And again, I come back to, why on earth are they not fighting on ships or in ships? On the hull of the ship, inside the ship, shipboarding. My goodness, like that. I mean, that's different. And I just think, to me, that's something that would just make me, empty my wallet straight into the developers' faces. That sounded wrong, but do you know what I mean? It's like, honestly, that is interesting to me, because that's like, yeah, that makes good sense. So anyway, there we go. So it's a really interesting podcast. I think definitely keep an eye out for them, because this was episode 1. So kind of interested to see where they go with it next. But, you ask yourself some fundamental questions. Again, being the Lord of Dust that I am, and I looked at it, 1,700 videos of dust breaks my mind. I think I had a bit of a problem. I had a breakdown, but it was in extreme creativity as well. But I kind of look at this game. I loved it. I thought Vanguard, the test was brilliant. I can't wait for the next iteration of it. So I am actively watching it. We're doing videos like this because I'm really into it. And I'm really quite excited about it. And I think you should be too. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that. There is a VIP program. I don't know much about it. I'm not part of it because it's just too confusing to work out how it works. But those of you who are, do please get in touch. And make sure you sign up for that VIP program, because they need your feedback. I hope you enjoyed that. See you next time.